Hi, my name is Ellie Falaris Ganelin. I'm the director of the Kombos Collective, which is an organization that celebrates the Hellenic world through music. I'm based in Berkeley, California, and I'm really happy to be on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, great to have you.
Thank you, Nico and Maria.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your how did you get involved in Greek music? What it is that you do? Maybe Balkan, Greek, all that stuff.
Totally. So while many of my programs happen and usually premiere here in the Bay Area, I also tour a few times a year. And the important thing to know about what I do is that I want to celebrate Hellenic culture, but I want to do it in a way that's sophisticated, that educates people, and most importantly, moves them. It's not a Kombos concert if you haven't shed a tear. I always bring something new to the table that's familiar to Greek listeners, but I also want to stretch people a little and get them out of their comfort zone. So there are a lot of Greek music events in the US that are there to preserve our folkloric cultures. And I think that's very noble. But my goal is to have a nod to tradition, but really to do something different. So I think also as a member of the diaspora, I feel it's important to invite people in. Sometimes my audiences are mostly Greek people. Sometimes they're mostly non-Greeks. Or you have people who are of Greek heritage, but don't speak the language or know the historical background around whatever program I'm presenting. And a little bit of a backstory about me personally. So I'm Greek and Croatian-American. I grew up in a village called Newark, Delaware. My dad is from Thessaloniki, and my mom's parents were from Zagreb in Croatia, which is former Yugoslavia. So I have this mixed identity. My dad would joke that he wanted people he could speak Greek to, so he created his conversation partners, me and my brother. He told me more recently that people in our town would stare at us, in this little town in Delaware. They would stare at us when we speak Greek in the grocery store, and he simply wouldn't care. It was clear that he'd made a conscious choice to impart the Greek language to me and my brother.
First of all, I think that's adorable about how you phrase that your dad made his conversation partners. I love that. I don't want to this might spin us a little bit, but that's okay. We're on a podcast. We can talk about whatever. The idea of identity. I was in a class last night, and the person who was a guest speaker in the class, it was like not an academic class, just a kind of a fun class, if you will, was saying, he was like, so many times we divide Greece out of the Balkans, right? And his whole point, he's like, Greece is part of the Balkans, but Greeks don't want that identity. They want to be Greek, or, they want that separation, right? The Balkans are, countries that are essentially not Greece, but he was like, really Greece and Italy. And I was like, oh, Italy, part of the Balkans. I'm like, that to me is a little bit more of a stretch. I was, rolling with it, just absorbing and listening. Talk to us a little bit, if you have any thoughts about that, or even like this whole thing of identity. Like Newark, Delaware, if anybody's ever been there, it's not necessarily a wildly diverse place, right? And I mean that with respect. It's not like a large city. Like it is, but talk to us about identity and growing up and this idea of, is there separation between Balkans, Greece and the Balkans?
Clearly, in some ways, I would say that my Croatian and Greek identities, I saw them as sort of different. I didn't see a lot of overlap between the two, but in some ways, it was all one thing, right? Because they're part of the Balkans, there's a sort of connecting, aspect of things. And I think also because I grew up also in a folk dance community, I actually wanted to chat about that too, which is that we didn't actually grow up in a Greek community, but my mom did folk dancing. So she was in this international folk dance group that would meet on Friday nights. It's a college town, and so there's a lot of people from the university there. And I would say most of the dances were from the Balkans, including Greece. So we would visit family in Croatia a few times in the 90s before it was cool. And my dad also spent a few summers teaching in Bulgaria. So we visited Bulgaria a few times in the early 90s. And when I was 7, we attended the major folklore festival that happens there, Koprivnica. I don't know if you've heard of it, which happens every 5 years. They just had the festival this past year in 2025. So I was 7. And when I attended this, I actually remember it. And I distinctly remember how impressed I was that all these people were so invested in their folkloric culture. We also visited Greece every summer, so I would spend time with my grandma, with my yaya, and other relatives, and we would go to these open-air concerts, which were just like a magical experience. I would see like Eleftheria Arvanitaki, Marius Frangoulis, a lot of Laika. And what was remarkable to my dad was hearing Frangoulis, who's this trained opera singer, interpreting Laika and Endechno. And, usually these songs were performed by club singers. So this was like a really novel combination, and I totally didn't realize at the time that this mix of factors would influence my whole music career. But to get back to your question, yeah, absolutely. I do see Greece as part of the Balkans, and I think as you get to the folkloric level, you see it so much more. I actually attended a workshop recently for Yanis Kostadiniou, who's from Florina in northern Greece. He comes to the Bay fairly often through this group called Greek Feet. So maybe you guys know him. He was super awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not much of a folk dancer, so it was actually very humbling to learn from him because he's very quick to iterate off of what he's doing and improvise, which is super awesome. And one of the things he talked about in the workshop was how when you see people kind of have variations in their dance, it gives away where they're from. They may be Vlach or Albanian, North Macedonian. And I think being in a border region like Florina, it gives you a window into this is just a normal thing to live in that part of the world. And when you're studying folk dance, and the same thing with the music too, you see how you have these sort of local flares, but it's more similar than different.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yanni is great. And kudos to you for doing his workshop because he has an intensity when he teaches. And, I
Totally.
think
Yeah.
if you're not used to dances from Florina, like talk about like a crash course in syncopation and don't even try to really count. It just doesn't work. And maybe it does for people who are musically inclined, but I remember the first time I brought him to do a workshop, he was trying to explain the syncopation in Levendico or Pushcheno, whichever way you like to say it. And I had tried to teach this dance group that for years, and they were just like, Maria, there's got to be something wrong. Like, it's just so weird. And then he taught it, and they were like, oh, we get it now. I'm like, of course you get it, but he's amazing.
I
He's
also
really
think
great.
that super. I also just feel like if I were to attend his workshops a few more times, at some point it'll just penetrate. The steps will just penetrate. I don't know, but somebody asked me recently, like, why are rhythms in the Balkans odd? And I said mostly from a musical standpoint, you break things down into smaller groupings, long and short. And by doing some of these dances from this region, it was very clear the movement side of that odd rhythm, right? So you'd be doing sort of a walk, 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 and then a lift with one foot. That's the short, 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 long.
Mm-hmm.
I've
That's so
I've
cool.
never made that connection. But yeah, you know it, but oh wow.
Yeah.
From what I understand, like, we might count things in a very strict way, like everything is subdivided by an eighth note, a 16th note, something like that. But I think a lot of times in the Balkans and like at the source, it's not quite so precise. You just feel it. The short and the long is more of a feeling than a precise something that you can break down into smaller groupings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 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 I think it makes sense. And I think it depends on who you're dancing with. Like, right, Nico? Like, what I have playing through my head, because I'm a super visual person, is like a group of men dancing Le Vendigo. And if they're like really getting into it, like the musician is following their steps. So if they're really holding that long and exaggerating it out and, flaring and doing their thing, the musician is going to kind of echo that in their rhythm, right? They're going to fit the rhythm to the person. Yeah.
It's funny you
So
guys
cool.
bring up that we brought up the syncopation because the group I'm teaching this year, older 20s and 30s, and they've never really understood what syncopation is. And in the beginning of the year, really explaining it to them, showing them, like this is something that is very unique, again, to the Balkans, especially, I feel. And it's just, it almost, it's hard for them, to wrap their mind around it. We really had to work, and they're finally kind of starting to understand, like, oh, okay, like this is, and it's also how a lot of leaders do their figuras and whatnot, because they can, go off of that syncopation. It's so Yeah, it's I think something that I'm glad is starting to show up more and more. People are starting to understand.
Super. Well, also, like, I was going to talk a little bit more later, but I have a Balkan band now, and it's all players that are specialized in Western music. But, because of the Bay Area, you have all these people that are curious and interested to learn, which is the best part. And so I felt like in the beginning, my rhythm section, everybody's counting out the meter in 5 or in 7 or in 9 and just trying to like intellectualize it. And over time, it becomes more of a feel and they can kind of lay into it and be more comfortable.
I pulled up your website and I'm looking at, I've never seen a ghost plate before. The instrument. Is that how you say it? Ghost plate?
Yes,
I'm like, is there an
totally.
accent there
Yes.
that is wild. Like, how do you even
Super.
play that?
So my friend Kostas, who's also Greek American, is a composer, and he was working with this instrument inventor in San Francisco. Very San Francisco project, by the way, to have somebody that invents instruments and creates cool music around it.
Yes.
The original inventor is Tom Nunn. He passed away a couple of years ago, and Kostas worked with him when he was studying at the SF Conservatory. Anyway, so the ghost plate is a symbol. It's basically meant to represent Talos, the mythic guard robot that guarded Crete against invaders that shows up in mythology. And the idea is you play it and it sounds like you've created it on a synthesizer. Like if you didn't see somebody playing it, you'd think it was all digital sounds, but it's all completely acoustic. So there's this, thinking about AI and realness and whatever. And this is like from during the pandemic. So this is from like 6 years ago. So just before AI really exploded as a thing that we all use. But the idea was that so he plays it, he strikes the bottom of the sort of the flat metal base of it. And then there's these sort of vertical rods that are welded to the top that kind of stick out like grass. And you bow them with a violin bow. So it makes these kind of metallic zing sounds. There's an instrument from the 70s called the waterphone that has a lot of the same sound. You'll kind of hear it in like orchestral soundscapes, like in, I don't know, maybe Space Odyssey or something like that. If you hear it, you'll be like, oh, I know what that is. And it was kind of a familiar sound at the time. So it's kind of an echo to that. But this is sort of different in that it's, we're playing with chamber music, smaller number of instruments and adding electronics on top. It's a super fun project. And also one of the few times that I really got into the classics. So working with Greek American composer, like sort of the modern expression of it, but also kind of looking back to ancient stories.
I think that is, like, wow. Sometimes when I hear people like you speak, I'm like, first of all, what am I doing with my life? There's all these existential things that fly through my mind, but it's just like level of one, it's creativity. First of all, for the person who created this instrument, like, how do you even get to that? I don't even know, right? It'd be so amazing, and God rest his soul, but to sort of be in that brain of like, what was going on where you were like, oh, I'm going to weld these, because it looks exactly like how you described, like pieces of grass or like even like reeds, if you will. So it's not only creativity, but what's so cool is the focus of your music to connect to the folk or to connect to ancient or, mythology or stories. How did that kind of come about? Like, what was the genesis of that?
So when I started learning to play the flute when I was 10, I played in my school band. It was kind of an arbitrary choice, but I think kind of the sorting hat also chose me, let's be honest. If you're going to be serious about playing flute in the United States, your formal training is very likely going to be in Western classical music. So I took private lessons all the way through high school and then even went and got a music degree, all with a focus on Western classical music. But I'm also a jazz fan and always found ways to play jazz too, either in my high school or college big bands or playing in jazz combos. So while I was growing up, my music life was very rich, but also very separate from my heritage, my Greek and Croatian heritage. I will say, though, I did have some sheet music for the folk dances that my mom would do with her group. So sometimes I would play some folk tunes at holiday parties, but that was pretty much the extent of it. Folk music didn't really play a role in my life for quite a while. So how did Kombos Collective come to be? Which is your burning question. Really, one piece of music by a diaspora Greek composer inspired the whole project. So after college, I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I got a job working at a small concert venue that had an eclectic music series called Carrolltown Concert House. They presented and still present classical music, jazz, world music, experimental music. And I had a coworker who also was a regular gigging violinist in the area. She played with several regional orchestras. And one day she came to me, she said that she had just performed this piece with the Flint Symphony called the Aegean Festival Overture. It was written by this Greek-born composer named Andreas Makris, and he was the principal violinist for the National Symphony Orchestra and also a composer in residence there for many years. So my coworker really liked this piece and says to me, hey, there have to be more pieces like this one. We should do a concert of Greek composers. So the short of it is I ran with that idea. By then I had developed a relationship with the Modern Greek program at the University of Michigan in town there, and I had gotten mentorship and support from them to put on the first concert in 2011, and it was a wild success. It was full house, very enthusiastic response. All the players were really excited about the project. So then I started going under the name Greek Chamber Music Project, and I continued to organize concerts here and there, exclusively featuring music by Greek composers. And this was very novel when I started in 2011, even for Greece. Like you might hear a piece here or there on a concert by a Greek composer, but not a whole program. So after living in Ann Arbor for a couple of years, I moved a few times. So the project moved with me, first to DC and then later to San Francisco. And I've picked up some collaborators along the way that I still work with, which is cool. So about 7 years ago, I made an artistic shift. So rather than curating concerts as a pastiche, where all the composers merely share a nationality, I started to build programs that have a central theme. So there would be more context and storytelling that make the music experience more meaningful. Some collaborations I did were on the Jews of Greece, where I work with a Sephardic singer. Talos Streams, which is this ancient project I was talking about, was another example of that. And then at the beginning of 2024, I won a couple of grants to put on a larger scale production called Music of Resistance, which primarily features the music of Mikis Theodorakis. And this was with a choir and a small instrumental ensemble. We had 30 people on stage, 200 people in the audience. It was a packed house. And it was a lot of work, but it was also super rewarding. And I'm hoping we can revive that project in another city. And then also, I'll just say, like later in 2024, I rebranded as Kombos Collective. Kombos, is the Greek word for a knot, like that you tie with a rope. And up to that point, I was going under the name Greek Chamber Music Project. So first of all, the concept of chamber music to me seems misunderstood. Most people think of it as elitist or exclusive and strictly classical music. Because I worked at this venue in Ann Arbor that presented small ensemble music of all kinds, I had a very inclusive definition of chamber music. I more saw it as concert music for a small ensemble, something that you could perform in a living room, which is how chamber music kind of got its start, but it doesn't have to be. So I also imagine chamber music being like jazz or world music rather than like a show or like live entertainment. So the other thing I have been thinking about a lot is how the Hellenic world fits into a larger context. And I didn't want my organization name to constrain what I wanted to do as an artist. So my more recent projects are Uproot and Varadari, and both have gained repeat success that I think I figured out this formula. Both focus on folk music and employ my own voice, my own arrangements. And a big part of these programs is the storytelling. So what's been really important to the storytelling is that I anchor both of these projects to my ancestors from the Hellenic world. So Uproot is a program of refugee songs and storytelling, which was originally created to commemorate the centennial of the Asia Minor catastrophe in 1922. I developed the program with the singer Katerina Klambaneva, who is active in the rebetiko scene in London, actually. The music is a collection of rebetiko and Smyrneka tunes, so songs from urban folk songs from Smyrna, and arranged in this sort of chamber jazz style with rebetiko vocals, which kind of helps ground the whole sound. And so the other instruments are flute, clarinet, and piano, and some special guests on our album. Katerina and I talk about the history in the concerts, and also I talk about my ancestors who were from Smyrna and their experience as refugees. Before I started the project, I didn't know much about the Asia Minor catastrophe, honestly. My dad would tell me stories about how his grandmother and her kids escaped the burning city, but I didn't understand the historical context around what was happening. Nico, I know you said you also have some Asia Minor ancestry.
Yeah. My great grandma, she was there by Constantinople, and pretty much same deal. They left very, very quickly. Yeah. I haven't actually. I haven't had the luxury because they didn't really like. At least my great grandma didn't like talking about it, so my mom never really heard any stories to be able to tell us. What it was just very traumatic experience. Yeah, especially as a
Super.
little girl. She was a little girl when it happened.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't want to talk about it, I think. I actually think that the centennial, so in 2022, was kind of an opportunity to revisit, sort of have this collective grief and healing in a way. Yeah, so my dad would tell the story, but I also just I didn't know what else was going on. I just knew that as this sort of like one-off thing that was happening to our family. So with Uproot, my idea was to bring together the music and the history and the personal accounts, and that really resonates with people. As I was saying, it becomes this collective experience for people, like we grieve and we heal together. Of course, many Greek people have roots in Asia Minor, and the refugee experience is universal and unfortunately very current. The refugee experience is also something that speaks to people today. So the project Uproot premiered in 2023 in the Bay Area, and it actually continues to tour to other parts of the U.S. We actually did our first international performance in London last year, and we have a performance in Traverse City, Michigan, coming up in March. Yeah, we're just getting out there and telling our story.
That's so fantastic. And I mean, I'm sure you just didn't even realize it would develop into something like this.
Super.
You know, it's funny where life really takes us, and especially when we have a passion for something that we love so much, and it can really evolve into something what I think very special and very not just unique, but remarkable for the Hellenic heritage in general.
Thank you.
You're bringing the two worlds together, the old and the new, and revisiting, like this with Uproot. I mean, I would love to find out when the next show is and definitely come see it.
Totally. Well, hopefully we'll come to Seattle one day.
Yeah. I do still frequent the Bay,
Cute.
so there's something there. Yeah, Maria will bring you out. We can get the other Maria that's out there too.
I'm ready. Now that I work from home, I am flexible as can be. I think it's just the title, uprooting, for me at least, evokes some interesting feelings. And we just came off of, one of the big Greek dance competitions. And I almost want to venture to guess that when people are exploring and when they're researching, right, for presentations on stage, for, teaching their groups dances and stuff like that, there's such a push to get authentic. Not that any research is not authentic, but to get like videos or clips, right? This is sort of new, if you will. Like, yes, that's how you learn the dances, but people are looking for things, videos from baptisms where they might see, this footage, right? And I'm going to connect this to Uproot, I promise. But I almost feel like when you dig into research that much, when you dig into past culture that much and these stories, I think some people who are really sensitive and maybe know like a little bit more, spend a lot of time with a family to try to get to know them, to like ask questions of like, how did your family dance this? Or how did your family sing this song? There's almost that absorption of their experience. And I think what we're seeing in some of the directors who teach groups or do their own research, or people who are just interested in this in general, kind of have this like secondary lived experience through what they're unearthing, through the stories. Like there's some really intimate moments when you're meeting with somebody and you're like, well, tell me why. Like, why did your yaya do it this way? Or why did so and so do it this way? And it's almost like through the arts, we're exposing people a little bit. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just think we're exposing like these stories of Asia Minor. We're exposing these stories of occupation or of, we dance this way because that's how somebody in our family did it. And Uncle John, just kept on going. And that's why we do it that way. And it's just so interesting that this exposure, this resurgence, or this second sort of life, if you will, is coming through the arts, I guess I don't know how to have
Super.
the actual words,
It's
but
beautiful, kind of the way you're talking about it. Well, it's a couple things. Number one, it's the process of researching and getting really like immersed in the history and the tradition. When I was researching these songs, they're all Arabetic and Smirneka at their core. They're all old songs. it was very emotional for me.
Yeah.
Especially the Rebetika that are about, being far from home and dealing with, the heartbreak of, the trauma of being displaced and being in a new land. Like, that was my ancestors. And also, I had this realization, it didn't happen all at once. I had this realization at some point. I was like, the Smirneka, like, I knew some of the Rebetika tunes before, but it was like the Smirneka were new to me. And I was like, wait a second. I never met my ancestors from Smyrna. Even my grandfather, who was a child at the time, had died fairly young, so I never met him. But, my ancestors, they would have known these songs.
Yeah.
Like, it just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
It's heavy.
Like, that was to be an artist, I had this obligation. It's like my personal journey to connect the story, right? To connect. It's through the music. It's my only living connection to my ancestors.
I think with something you said struck me as well, is, those songs having, I think, so much depth and heaviness to them is we don't also realize if there's some movies and things like that have brought this to light in the sense that these people that were refugees weren't necessarily welcomed by their own people, by the Greeks. Like, oh, you're from Constantinople, or you're from, Cappadocia. It's like, we're all Greek. We're all Greek Orthodox. We're the same, we're the same culture, but we're just from somewhere else, apart. And they kept getting displaced, even what they thought was their own home.
Super.
So there was a lot of that I think a lot of us, or that gets overlooked.
And not all of them spoke Greek. I mean, some spoke Turkish, and they moved to the
Yeah.
US. And the idea that you don't have I have homelands, I have relatives in mainland Greece, but some people don't have a homeland to go back to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Pontic Greeks, they have their own dialect that's very, different. Same thing with Cypriots, even, that's a more recent
It's humbling
deal,
to listen to watch movies or something where they speak Cypriot Greek,
Yes.
because I'm like,
Yeah.
it's another
I
language
know.
to me.
Yes. I think too, like that ancestral tie. How do I say this? I mean, I don't really care what people think of me actually, so I'm just going to say this, but we can still have conversations with our ancestors, right? Like
Yes.
that's why people have like maybe not the only reason why they have pictures, but like you have photos of your family in your house. Like they're still around in some way, shape, or form. Now, people might not believe in that, but that is my belief. And I just think like every time we get up there and we do something, whether it's, through what you're doing with Kombos Collective, or if somebody is, dancing or whatever, there's that veil between worlds is just a little bit different at that point in time. And I think that sometimes explains like why people feel so moved by certain sounds or frequencies or melodies or steps in a dance, right? Like there's just some kind of connection. And it's like, for me, at least when I experience these things where I'm just like, golly, like I'm obsessed with this dance or this song or whatever, I always think about like, what is the deeper tie there? Like, was that important to my Yaya Papu? Like, was that a song that they loved, that they danced to? I don't know, right? I don't necessarily, I never really like knew that side of them, but it's so interesting to kind of think about like, you're creating these beautiful compositions. There's significant ancestral ties, whether it's to the Greek side or the Croatian side, whatever it might be, or both. There's got to be a little bit of like, intergenerational mingling that happens, somehow. I'm a big believer in that.
Super. Yeah, I mean, it transports you when you hear just the
Mhm.
beginning of a song. It immediately, and for one's elders too. Maybe there's a song that they literally haven't heard in a very long time, and they hear this, and they immediately transports them to when they were young.
Yeah.
I've definitely
Yeah.
seen that in concerts before.
I bet.
I want to talk a little. I want to talk a little bit about my other project, Vardari, which I premiered last year. It's about shared folk melodies, and it ties a little more broadly to my Yugoslav heritage. So for this project, I actually sing, and not only sing, also in 9 languages.
Wow. I love that. That's amazing.
There's a few different reasons why I approached this project in this way, but one of my starting points was directly from Uproot. There are actually a couple Uproot songs in that set list that are shared melodies. But of course, I first learned them as Greek language songs. I found out that a song like Apoxenotopo is actually a universal melody. It exists in like lots of languages. And in the Balkans, that's also really symbolic because, it's a place that's has a lot of division, nationalism, a war-torn kind of area, and people, in such a small geographic area like to see how they're more different, see their differences really. But when you look at songs like this, it turns out that our cultures are actually more similar than different, and we all like the same tunes. I really set out an ambitious project for myself. So I was researching the repertoire, arranging all the charts for my band, playing flute. I decided that I wanted to train as a singer so that I could sing in all these languages, and in so doing, to walk in the footsteps of my ancestors. So my dad's paternal grandparents were from Smyrna, and so Uproot is kind of anchored around their story. But his maternal grandparents were from the city of Monastiri, which is modern-day Bitola in North Macedonia. So my great-grandparents there, Petros and Anastasia, they spoke 5 languages, as you do when you live in an Ottoman city. This is just a way of life, to communicate with your neighbors and in the market and so on. So the name Vardari comes from the Vardar River, which, like the music, transcends borders. So while my other projects are more heavily planted in concert music, Vardari is much more a band, which is, I would describe it as a Balkan chamber jazz rock fusion. Super fun. The arrangements and the number of languages gives the music a lot of complexity for like a listening experience, but it's also meant to be live music that you can move and dance to. So yeah, that's Vardari for you.
Fantastic.
I would say actually very few of the songs in my set list right now are folk dances. One of them I do, maybe you're familiar from Epirus, is Domilo, which also exists as an Albanian melody, Njezet Peskrisheta. So yeah, to give you an idea. But other ones I try to do, like I have a Rebetiko tune that Rosa Eskenazi sings in Greek and Turkish, actually, Kanarini Mugliko, but I do it as a reggae tune. So
nice.
So cool.
That's it's in so 2, cool. So like you have a bit of flexibility.
Absolutely.
So awesome. That's so cool. It's wild how the world works, because just before this podcast, I was on the phone with a friend and we were talking about how she had a really in-depth conversation with a very renowned dance instructor. And he was saying how the worst invention ever is the cell phone, because people will go to, you might know who I'm talking about, Nico. People will go to like the village and they'll be, trying to learn from people, and then they'll take out their cell phone and record. And the people who are singing or dancing or whatever will react to that cell phone coming out, and they will change either like their intonation or their tune a little bit, or maybe dance a little bit with more flair. And he's like, and we're losing, the history. And I said to her, I was like, or we're losing how it was, the pureness, let's call it that, the purity. And I said to her, I was like, well, at what point do these things change? Or like, maybe it's just like, that's a variation. It's, and she was like, I don't know, but it's interesting when you say like, you put it to like a reggae tune or you put it to a jazz kind of flavor. It's just a way to present things with a different lens, right? Like the root is still there, but it's an interpretation.
It is. Well, and also, this is a fusion. There's all kinds of fusions, right? In the Greek American experience and the diaspora experience, right? You have all kinds of fusions, interpretations. That's just how it is. But also it's an invitation. So for people that, so many of my audiences are not Greek or not from the Balkans, but they are welcomed into what I'm doing because there's something familiar to them. Maybe it's because of the jazz or the chamber elements, the rhythm section, the rock, whatever the situation is. There's something that they can grasp onto that they are familiar with. And then what's new for them is the tune, the language, the aesthetic. For Greek people, it's the other way around, right? They recognize the tune, but then how it's presented and the aesthetic is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so neat.
I bet you're curious about how I sing in these different languages. Yeah. I use Zoom, so
I have lots of questions.
I know.
I'll start with that one.
English.
But do tell us. Do tell us.
Okay, so I used Zoom. I would record Zoom calls with native speakers in the different languages. We're talking Albanian, North Macedonian, Turkish. Let's see. I also sang in Ladino, but I didn't get coaching. I just listened to recordings for that one. For BCS, which is Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, Armenian. So, for example, and so people would basically read the lyrics of the song slowly, and I would record it so that I could go back and listen to it. And then usually there would be a bit of back and forth. So then I would practice it and record it and then send it back to the coach, and they would give me feedback. They'd be like, "Hey, this is pretty good, but you should work on this thing and that thing." So, it's a fun process. Had worked, I was mentioning how I did this Music of Resistance, this Thessaloniki project a couple of years ago. We had a soloist for that one, a mezzo-soprano, who's not a Greek speaker. She sings in Spanish and Ladino. And I just had a sense that, and she has a bit of a folky sound and a classical sound. I just thought that she would be perfect for this project. Her name is Melinda Becker. And so I trained her on the Greek lyrics for the Thessaloniki. We did Mathausen, which is about the Holocaust. I recorded a video of myself speaking the lyrics slowly, and then we would talk about it. And I was like, she did such a good job. And the Greek people in the audience were like, hey, her diction was really good. So I had the sense that, you can do it. I could do it. Why not? If I sit and listen with an open musical ear, and you talk to people that are willing to, they'll tell you, if you say p in English, it's not the same as b in Greek, right? The English p has a little more air at the end of it, right? Those sorts of things. If you're open to listening for those, I don't know, it's very in the weeds, but it's very interesting. It gives you hopefully an authentic sound.
That's so cool. How long did it take you to get through that process and feel like maybe where the switch flipped where you're like, okay, I could do this now on stage with, in a performance where I'm
Super.
sure there's, even though you're highly trained and, this is very much your kind of legacy, what you're working on here. I'm sure there's probably a little bit of nerves or energy that comes up when you're going into a performance. But how long did it
Yeah.
take to
Well,
learn
also
all those
because I
nine?
was training as a singer at the same time that I was also learning the songs. That's really
Yeah.
a lot. Ideally you do one
Yeah.
at a time.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, nah, we'll
Running
take it
in the
all.
deep end.
I had part of it, I mean, there was a bit of a time constraint that I was trying to honor because I had gotten some grants. And so I was trying to, use as much time as possible to research the songs and really get deep, to deeply understand them before I even started singing them. Right. That was a lot
Yeah.
of it, was just intimately understanding the songs, the ornamentation, what the instruments are doing, the rhythms, that sort of thing, really breaking it down. Um, yeah, it took about a year, I would say. Well, it was about
Wow.
a year and a half of vocal training. And then some months of practicing my arrangements. At this point, if I'm just walking around the house singing, I'll switch. I'll sing Miserlou. I'll sing it in BCS, and I'll sing it in Greek, and I'll sing it in Armenian. Those are all the languages I sing it in. And so I'll sort of switch between them because I don't change keys. I just, it sort of starts to flow one into the other because I've practiced it so much. But if it's a new song, that's not going to come so easily, right? It's just the way you would practice an instrument or practice your voice. The language becomes another layer to that.
It's fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about
Thank you.
your creative process? How do you come up with an idea or how do you sort of run with something that might cross your mind and you're like, this is it? How does that happen in your world?
It's so many different sources. Uproot was an idea from a member of my advisory board who said, hey, this anniversary of the Asia Minor catastrophe is coming up. And sure enough, a lot of people in the Hellenic world and the diaspora were doing events around it. So that was a very kind of timely motivation. As far as the combination between, arrangements and so on, it's just because I'd been doing this for a while and I just knew that I was starting with the songs, that the interpretation kind of came on its own. I feel but that was the result of doing this for more than 10 years, right? I don't know that I would have been able to create Uproot in 2011 when I started this project. In my early years, it was about curating, researching and curating songs, and in a way doing kind of a study. A lot of the times I would pick pieces, classical piece sonatas, for flute or violin or piano or whatever, where the composer had incorporated Greek folk elements into the music. And usually they weren't necessarily taking existing tunes. They were like writing their own a lot of the time using that aesthetic or the rhythm or something like that. And so in a way, it was like a study. It was like studying what other people are doing. And then at some point, by osmosis, I start to do my own thing. I have another project, Out of Time, Out of Place. I work with a couple artists from Detroit, and we sort of have it's a mix of pieces. The main piece is actually written by this pianist, Michael Malice. He's one of the members of our trio. It's a song cycle set to the poetry of C.P. Cavafy, who is also an artist in diaspora from Alexandria. His poetry is so universal. It's so beautiful. And so is this piece for a singer for baritone and piano called Another Shore, Another Country. And then we piece together other songs on the program. I do some songs from Uproot. We do some Laika tunes, all three of us together, which is very charming and kind of fun because, our baritone, he sings and with his beautiful voice, and then he'll also play baglama. And hearing that with the piano and the flute, you get these elements that are like familiar and different, and it's just very endearing. And just to say that the collaboration is a big part of it, that it's not only that I come up with all these ideas entirely on my own from scratch. So much of what I do is the result of really great collaborations with others who bring new and interesting ideas to the table.
Yeah. I think that's so neat because I do think an environment that is supportive in that way, or when you're with people that you just sort of mesh with, like things happen, ideas flow, they flourish, they might hibernate for a while and then they kind of come back, or, you get back to that scratch
Yeah.
pad and you're like, when we were doing this, what if we went this route? And then it's like sometimes the most beautiful thing can appear from that. And a lot of it is just the environment is primed for it. Like how you said that, that you started with the flute, but the flute kind of chose you, my paraphrasing, right?
Yes.
That's not just like happenstance, right? There's probably something to that. So that's neat. It's really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you see this going
Go
in
ahead,
the
Nico.
future?
I have a couple other ideas that I'm toying with. I'm not quite ready to like run with them. At this point, I sit back and say, wait a second, I have all these cool projects. They're all different from each other. And I'm just trying to present them tour more with my Jews of Greece project, with Out of Time, Out of Place, with Uproot, with Vardari. It's like I have enough. I have enough for right now. I may write or arrange some new songs for Vardari over the next year. I want to build out my repertoire for that group. Always keep it kind of fresh. But I really want to explore the concept of queer artistry in the Hellenic experience, because I feel like this is something that's not well received in Greece still. And I think because I live in San Francisco, I am in this kind of unique space to do something here. And this is where, being Greek American, I get to pave a path for what I'm doing as an artist, as an organization that's different, and I get to claim my being Hellenic American in this way that's like on my own terms. So that's a kernel of an idea, but just to say that I'm thinking about new kind of intersections. Balkan shared melodies is another set of intersections. Yeah, great question.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah, I think kudos to you for
Thank you.
continuing to think about, this space, how you want to even have your own metamorphosis and growth and all that in this space, and also honoring the fact that you have a lot of really amazing things out there, and like living in that too. I think that's really, that pause is so important in anything that we do. It's the same thing, like, not trying to compare, but even with the podcast, we pause often, and it's like at some point you have to do that as a way to recharge your own battery to be better or whatever for the next step, whatever that may be.
Yeah,
Evolves.
to be sustainable,
Mhm.
to take care of yourself. Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah. I think especially with creative pursuits, when they're so deeply connected to either like person or space or place or whatever it might be, I think that just takes a lot more energy than just like mental energy, right? There's somatic and emotional energy roped into that too. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Ellie, kind of just to ask a like not out of left field question, but I guess I probably should have told you this ahead of time.
Sure. Go
But
for
kind
it.
of maybe even thinking about this as we sort of move to, kind of close out our time, is there anybody who is on your absolute, I would love to perform with, collaborate with, list, alive or dead? Let's put it that way.
Or
A
maybe
person
both.
I
Give us one and
admire,
one.
great
Yeah, or
question.
both,
So a
yeah.
person I very highly admire, it would be great to collaborate, but I'm okay to just be a big fan, is Petros Klampanis. Do you know this guy? He's a jazz bassist and producer. He used to be in New York City. He's from Athens and he lives there now. He
Yeah.
tours a lot, mostly in Europe. He's very inspiring to me because he has another point of view as far as combining Greek folk music elements into the language of jazz. He's worked with Arati Ketime on Smirneka, and I just love what he's doing. I continue to be inspired. Yeah, and I'll also go a little bit backwards in time because there's this group that I don't think exists anymore, Electric Balkan Jazz Club. They were very formative to my listening experience in the early 20s. I think it's a couple Greek guys and maybe there's a Serbian musician in there too, based in Germany. So they just basically recorded this one album, but it was a very early formative experience for me to hear Balkan music in this fusion, and a lot of times shared melodies like Ramo Ramo they do in Serbian and Greek, for instance.
Mhm.
So that just to say that these are past and present big inspirations of mine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've listened to, I don't know if his album is Little Blue Sun or if his album is called something different. It's probably called something different, but I remember listening to him because I'm a big Arati fan.
Mhm.
Yes.
So I remember they were collaborating on something and I was like, oh, this is cool.
She seems so sweet, and I watched a
She's
lot of
really
videos of her for my research, especially for Uproot because she focuses on Smirneka, but also for Vardari too. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like
yeah, and
a,
I
a
love how
very,
she so has a lot of different avenues that she takes with her music, not just traditional, but the contemporary stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Ellie, this was so fantastic. Thank you.
It really was,
This was
yeah.
lovely.
Thank you again so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say one of my I got to say one of my not a favorite, but I would definitely say one of the better ones for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm sure we could have talked for a lot longer
Yeah.
because I think Maria, I told you like the first conversation that Ellie and I had, like it was supposed to be, just a few minutes and I think it ended up being like 45 an hour.
Easily. Yeah, I could talk about like the mixed heritage, the language, growing up
Yeah.
as a so many topics. The music, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm coming down to the Bay first weekend in March, so if we have time to grab coffee, I would love to. I don't know what your
Fantastic.
schedule's like or you being
And we
around,
have
but yeah.
my Detroit trio will be in town, so that's March 5 and 6 in Sacramento, and Piedmont will be doing our program Out of Time Out of Place. So
Oh, the
yeah,
Piedmont
great
one
time to
sounds
be
like
in.
it timed it really well. Huh.
Fantastic. Be
That's
great
Awesome.
to
amazing.
hang out with you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Ellie, how can people find you? And we'll include this kind of in the show notes as well, but how can people find you?
Sure. So my organization is Kombos Collective. You can go to kombosmusic.com, and my social media handles for YouTube, Facebook, Instagram are at Kombos Collective. So drop me an email if you're interested in booking one of my projects. Come to my shows,
Yeah.
check out my albums. We've got a lot of cool stuff going on. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me, Maria and Nico, on the show. What a pleasure.
Pleasure's
Oh
all
my
ours.
Sevgili bülbülüm sen aklımı aldın enni daladım mahculler yadın Ha sevgili bülbülüm sen aklımı